I was in Eagle Rampant with Tallulah Bankhead.
I think we should sector R.
Marlon Brando in The Godfather.
At 60, Marlon Brando said he had loved men and women. The words hit Hollywood like a sudden siren in traffic. Reporters replayed the sentence. Publicists held their breath. Studio myths cracked. He did not whisper. He said it clear, as if shedding armor. It was not a confession. It was a correction. And it came from the man who once bent American masculinity to his will. What happens when the most magnetic rebel admits his heart crossed forbidden lines? Careers have collapsed for less. Contracts had morality clauses. Lives were erased in silence. Brando refused erasure. To understand why, we must return to the boy before the legend, and hear where desire first learned to speak. Marlon Brando entered the world in 1924, in Omaha, Nebraska. Winter winds scraped the plains. Meatpacking whistles cut the morning air. His father worked hard and scowled harder. His mother loved theater and liquor in equal measure. The house changed with her moods, like a radio drifting between stations. He watched, listened, learned to read the room before anyone spoke. That is where the mimic was born, in kitchen shadows. The family moved to Libertyville, Illinois, a quiet town with long sidewalks. On Saturdays, Main Street offered penny candy and stiff collars. Church bells met the chug of farm trucks. Boys learned to square their shoulders and swallow their tears. Girls learned to smile and keep secrets. The Great Depression shaped every conversation, even when plates looked full. People saved string, folded paper, and counted favors. Music floated from porch to porch, big band on the airwaves, crackling and sweet. At school, Brando, called Bud at home, tested every rule. Teachers demanded order. He offered questions and jokes. His father tried to force him straight, like ironing a stubborn collar. The more pressure applied, the more the fabric bunched. His mother, Dorothy, dazzled local stages when sober. She wore costumes that smelled of dust and roses. She taught him lines while dinner burned. He learned timing from her, and the cost of hunger from the stove. America was hardening then. The Hays Code took hold in the 30s. Studio films began policing kisses and conversations. Desire needed a disguise. Suggestion replaced honesty. In small towns, the code echoed as custom. Men shook hands and looked straight ahead. Women wore gloves and glanced down. Anything else moved in whispers. Boys like Bud learned to keep words inside their cheeks, like coins. He landed at Shattuck Military Academy in Minnesota. Brass buttons, straight backs, marching feet. He despised authority and loved the company of rebels. He copied accents, faces, and limps for laughs. Punishments came often, sometimes deserved, sometimes not. Finally, he was expelled for insubordination. He left with a grin that frightened adults. It said, "Rules are fragile." It said, "I can break what breaks me." Back home, he worked odd jobs and watched the horizon. War headlines rose like smoke. Trains hauled new uniforms through the Midwest. The country demanded conformity, sacrifice, and patience. He had none to spare. The stage kept calling, half memory, half promise. He took the call. In New York, the air felt electric. Streetcars clanged, steam rose from subway grates. Newspaper boys barked names like they were drum beats. Theater posters peeled in the rain, revealing other posters beneath. He found his way to acting classes, hungry and certain. Teachers demanded truth, not poses. He discovered the method, the raw nerve inside the line. Stillness could speak. Silence could cut deeper than a speech. He learned to use his body like a sentence, with commas and a punch. World War II marched on. Soldiers danced with girls in floral dresses on leave. Nightclubs shook with trumpets and laughter over fear. The city tolerated differences if you kept them quiet. Theaters became sanctuaries, where emotion could breathe without a label. He met artists who refused to shrink for comfort. Their courage slid under his skin and stayed. He thought often of Libertyville, of the front steps at dusk, and his mother's half-smile. He swore he would turn the ache into something useful. Not a mask, but a blade. He would carve truth from the polite wall of lies. The country would come to watch. He knew it like a storm knows its path. What he needed next was a stage big enough to hold his hunger. Broadway waited with a door barely open. He reached for the handle and never looked back. New York opened like a stage door. He studied under Stella Adler, who spoke of imagination, not pain. She told him to see the world inside the line. He obeyed and resisted at once. The actor's studio sharpened his instincts. He learned to listen so hard the room seemed to lean toward him. Casting directors noticed. So did playwrights who wanted danger without losing the audience. Early roles tested his fuse. In Truckline Cafe, he tore through scenes like a live wire. Some critics balked at the roughness. Others felt the ground shift beneath their seats. He would not declaim like a gentleman. He attacked a moment, then abandoned it for a greater truth. That volatility became his signature. You were never sure if he would whisper or explode. Either way, you could not look away. Then came A Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway. The theater hummed like a power station. Jessica Tandy glowed as Blanche. He arrived on stage as Stanley with a torn t-shirt and a voice like gravel. He did not perform masculinity. He uncoiled it. Audiences gasped. Women clutched playbills like relics. Men studied their own posture on the way out. The word sensual began appearing in reviews that usually said, masculine. His body moved like a sentence that might end in a question. Hollywood called with a test. He stalled. He wanted work that mattered, not glossy frames. The Men became his first film in 1950. He lived in a veterans hospital to understand paralysis. Nurses admired his quiet attention. He learned the weight of a wheelchair and the rage inside stillness. On screen, the performance cut like clear glass. Critics took him seriously. Studios took notes. Here was a leading man who refused easy sentiment. Streetcar moved to film in 1951. Vivien Leigh, incandescent as Blanche, met his Stanley as flint meets steel. The camera adored what the stage had discovered: sweat, silence, and sudden bursts of need. The country, still straight-backed from war, watched desire argue with decorum. He received an Oscar nomination and the kind of fame that unthreads privacy. Billboards wanted his shoulders. Gossip columns wanted his nights. The next years cemented the legend. Viva Zapata in 1952 showed a revolutionary with tenderness and doubt. Julius Caesar in 1953 proved he could make Shakespeare sound like an argument in a kitchen. The Wild One the same year gave him a motorcycle and a question about rebellion that never ends. What are you rebelling against? What have you got? Teenagers copied the jacket and the stare. Parents locked vocal cords behind advice. He was both nightmare and promise, depending on the house. Then came On the Waterfront in 1954. The docks felt cold even in July. He created a man who wanted dignity more than safety. The glove scene with Eva Marie Saint became scripture for actors. He held softness like a secret, then let it bloom. The taxi monologue reached living rooms and bar stools. You felt the lost chances line up like uncollected paychecks. The Oscar arrived, heavy as a verdict. It did not quiet him. It only widened the stage. Publicity machines spun a story of the modern man, brooding but honorable, rugged but sincere. Photographers chased the half-smile and the squint. Studios watched their new star break rules and still make money. They tolerated the experiments because the box office forgave the headaches. He demanded better scripts, shorter days, and a say in everything. The old system creaked around him. Fan culture swelled. Young men modeled hair and slouch after him. Young women wrote letters that read like diary entries. Professors debated his method in classrooms that smelled of chalk and ambition. Priests warned about unruly appetites, and some parishioners nodded then bought tickets anyway. He altered the shape of male desire on screen. Power could be quiet. Vulnerability could be terrifying. Yet the cost surfaced between takes. Fame swallows. He felt it in narrow hallways and at late tables. Everyone wanted a piece. Studios wanted predictability. Reporters wanted access edged with friction. The mythology of the American male pressed against his private life like a wall. He sensed that the roles he played would never hold his full truth. He would honor the work, he promised himself, but not at the price of his soul. The spotlight widened. The shadows did too. In those shadows, other lives unfolded, careful and charged, where affection needed disguises, and nights were planned like heists. The city offered keys to locked rooms, if you knew who to ask. He did. And so the performance of control met the reality of longing. Behind doors everyone pretended not to see. The city had doors without names. You entered with a glance, not a key. Behind them, smoke curled around, laughter soft as velvet. Jazz hid in corners. Bartenders poured silence as carefully as gin. He learned who to ask. He learned where to stand. He learned to wait for a shoulder to brush his sleeve, then step into a safer light. Friends introduced friends with coded phrases. You will like him. He reads poetry. He wears Italian shoes. A smile could be a map. A touch under a table could be a promise. These were not scandals to the people inside those rooms. They were oxygen. Outside, the Hays Code still gripped the screens. Studios watched with ledgers and fear. Morality clauses traveled like shadows in contracts. A whisper could cost a house. He kept close company with Wally Cox, the gentle comedian from his youth. They shared rooms, jokes, and long silences. Reporters mocked the mismatch. Two men, so different, so entwined. Biographers disagree about romance, yet the intimacy was deep. He carried Wally's ashes after his death. He sprinkled them in places they loved. That level of care spoke in its own language. Other names entered the rumor mills like birds trapped in domes. Some said he flirted with young actors at after-parties. Some recalled nights at the Chateau Marmont, where curtains closed early. A pianist remembered him humming an old standard to a man in a blue suit. None of it was criminal. All of it was combustible in that era. Tabloids hunted ambiguity like foxhounds. Publicists recommended arm-in-arm premieres with actresses. It soothed investors and middle America. He complied when it served the work. Yet the unguarded smile appeared elsewhere. In private gardens, in back stairwells, in cars that idled one street over. Lovers, according to some accounts, included artists and dancers who understood hunger as discipline. He offered refuge from the noise. They offered touch without judgment. New York remained his second sanctuary. Greenwich Village felt like a held breath, finally exhaled. He walked in the fog after midnight. He found bars where waiters had perfect memories and careful eyes. Couples swayed 2 inches apart to keep the peace. He watched, then joined, drifting between tables like a kind of prayer. Poets shook his hand and pretended not to look curious. He left generous tips and fewer clues. He worked often out of town. Discreet travel granted brief freedom. A suite in a distant city, a door that clicked shut, and the world softened. Bellmen knew which newspapers to ignore. Housekeepers learned to knock twice. He paid for privacy and showed gratitude. People remember kindness longer than glamour. It kept secrets safer. Still, the machine pressed back. Studio lawyers added lines to contracts. Any behavior deemed immoral would terminate employment. Agents warned of photographers with long lenses. Confidential magazine paid cash for whispers. A valet could sell a story and buy a car. He learned to treat trust as currency. He never flaunted. He never begged. He moved like water around a stone. There were nights of joy so pure it startled him. A hand found his in a dark cinema. A shared joke spun into dawn. A weekend on the coast where the only schedule was the tide. He cooked eggs in a borrowed kitchen. He listened to a lover describe a childhood in another state. He laughed and forgot the race outside the window. Those hours reminded him why the risk was worth it. But risk accumulates. A studio fixer hinted at a folder with names. Reporters asked sly questions at press lines. A rival sent a note warning him to lie low. He saw friends lose chances for less. He watched careers shrink because a photograph escaped its envelope. The man who could command a set now took side exits and ducked out of lobbies. There were rumored entanglements with major figures, sometimes whispered in biographies, comedians, singers, and bold young stars who played with fire. A later partner claimed he had loved without borders. A widow swore he had affairs across categories. The accounts do not agree, yet they share a rhythm. He followed, feeling, not rules. He trusted the body as a compass. He believed love did not ruin art, Lies did. Even confession required calculation. Telling the truth in the wrong decade could end the work. So he kept his heart moving along back roads, guided by careful friends. He refused shame. He refused to let studios decide his private worth. He made space for tenderness wherever the door opened. He knew one day the door would open for good. Then, the world shifted. A journalist pushed harder. A microphone caught a frank answer. He let a sentence out that had waited years. He spoke of loving men and women with the same mouth that had changed American acting. The reaction arrived, fast and loud. Some cheered. Some panicked. Sponsors checked clauses. Producers checked calendars. The personal would now collide with the professional. The spotlight widened. The shadows did too. In those shadows, other lives unfolded, careful and charged, where affection needed disguises and nights were planned like heists. The city offered keys to locked rooms, if you knew who to ask. He did. And so the performance of control met the reality of longing. Behind doors everyone pretended not to see. The sentence was short. The shock was long. Publicists called with new instructions. Interviews narrowed. Producers smiled on the phone and frowned in meeting rooms. He could feel the pivot. You are valuable if you stay quiet. You are dangerous if you speak. Rumors already swirled in old clippings. Now reporters sharpened them. They asked about friends, nights, and the village. They asked about co-stars and dressing rooms. Some questions sounded polite. Others carried a blade. He parried when it protected a colleague. He deflected when a stranger's mortgage depended on silence. But he refused to apologize for feeling. That refusal cost him. Sponsors scanned contracts for morality clauses. Insurance agents asked new questions. Were there risks to reputations? Would family audiences sour? Studio lawyers drafted addendums with careful punctuation. Any conduct deemed immoral could void payment. The definition of immoral sat in someone else's desk. He signed when the work demanded it. He walked when dignity felt endangered. The press ran hot. Confidential copycats promised revelations. An extra offered a story for rent money. A driver hinted at photographs in a safe. Biographers note that several accounts contradicted each other. It did not matter. Contradiction still sells. He saw colleagues collapse under whispers thinner than smoke. He knew the pattern. First the rumor, then the retraction. The damage arrives between them. Roles shifted. Some became smaller than promised. Others fell apart in silence. A director praised his genius on Monday, then cast a safer choice on Friday. Foreign shoots were preferred now. Distance muted noise. It also bred loneliness. Hotel rooms grew huge at night. Room service tasted like cardboard when trust was scarce. He fought back the only way he knew, with craft, with nerve, with the kind of choices that made audiences lean in. But the business had changed. New stars offered cleaner narratives. Studios needed predictability for television tie-ins. He did not fit the grid. He gained weight for a role and kept it. Headlines adored the change more than the performance. Columnists mocked. He answered with silence that felt like armor, until it felt like stone. Friends counseled caution. Some advised a carefully staged interview to soothe sponsors. Others advised total retreat. He tried a middle path. Work that mattered. Appearances that felt fair. Charity events where purpose outweighed gossip. He still felt the trap. If he appeared, he fed the machine. If he vanished, he confirmed suspicion. The logic was cruel and circular. Personal losses deepened the valley. Wally Cox's death left an empty chair that no one else could fill. He kept the ashes near him, reportedly, like a quiet conversation partner. Family stretched thin under the weight of headlines and his stubborn privacy. Relationships frayed. Lovers asked for more light and fewer locks. He understood, and sometimes he could not comply. Alcohol whispered the easy script. Take the edge off. Sleep without listening for the night manager's knock. He flirted with that shortcut and hated its price. It blunted the instincts that built his life. He pulled back, then slipped, then pulled back again. The cycle exhausted him. Work remained the one place where energy turned into shape. The political world knocked. Civil rights, native rights, free speech. He welcomed the noise with purpose. Activism offered clarity that Hollywood denied. Yet activism also brought backlash. Columns called him a grandstander. Executives called him unpredictable. He carried the weight anyway. Integrity is heavy. So is exile. By the end of that decade, he stood at a low ridge. Reputation complicated. Finances tighter. Trust rationed like sugar in wartime. He stared at the ceiling in another rented place and counted the cost. He had told the truth as far as the culture allowed. The culture had punished the attempt. He needed a way to work without begging for permission. He needed one more door to open. The comeback arrived like a tide at night. Quiet, steady, undeniable. He took a role that seemed small on paper, a weary patriarch with a garden and a cat. The Godfather turned into a cultural earthquake. He moved softly and held power like breath. The performance reset his career and the crime genre at once. He collected prizes and turned interviews down. He had nothing to explain. The work spoke. He pivoted again with dangerous courage. Last Tango in Paris asked for exposure that wounded him later. He delivered a performance that felt like a confession. The line between character and self blurred. Critics hailed the daring. He walked away scarred by methods that cut too deep. Years later, he would criticize the process and the harm in plain terms. Some risks leave marks. The lesson stayed. Then he altered Hollywood's ritual. On Oscar night, he declined the statue for The Godfather. A young Native American activist walked on stage and spoke about misrepresentation and real pain. Boos mixed with applause. The moment burned into national memory. He had turned a trophy into a signal flare. Studios grumbled. Communities who waited to be seen nodded in recognition. He had chosen people over permission. The late 70s brought Apocalypse Now. He arrived heavy, luminous, unpredictable. He rewrote lines by instinct and darkness. He gave Colonel Kurtz a voice like fog over a river. The set shook. The film survived and became legend. Soon after, he took a star cameo in Superman and turned gravitas into currency. He liked surprising accountants. He liked paying for causes that did not fit a budget memo. He withdrew more often. He bought an island in the South Pacific and found quiet that fame could not touch. Tetiaroa became a refuge and a study. He learned tides, winds, and the slow patience of reefs. He planned sustainable buildings years before the word felt common. He hosted friends and children and scientists. He cooked simple food and asked long questions. The island, he said, reminded him of the unbroken song beneath the noise. Family joy and sorrow braided through those years. Children grew into their own storms. Biographers note conflicts that tested every bond. A tragedy in the early 90s shattered the house. Courts filled with cameras. Headlines turned grief into entertainment. He stayed mostly silent to protect the living. He answered questions in courtrooms and kitchens, and then he rested where microphones could not follow. Loss taught humility, sharper than critics ever could. He kept working when the role felt right. Smaller parts, stranger projects. He liked puzzles. He liked showing up for friends who needed a name to unlock money. Some films faltered. Others found cult status. He shrugged at verdicts and stayed focused on care. He gave generously to people who never appeared in articles. Drivers, assistants, musicians he admired. The circle of chosen family widened with every year. The culture around him changed. Stonewall had cracked silence. The 70s offered pockets of honesty. The 80s punished again with fear and funerals. The 90s learned to speak more clearly about love and rights. He watched all of it with a veteran's patience. He had lived the old secret rooms and the new open streets. He knew both required courage. He did not claim sainthood. He claimed humanity and defended it. In younger days, he strained to remake the screen. In later years, he tried to remake the frame around it. He argued for dignity and representation. He argued for reparations and real study, not slogans. He took calls from activists and parents and students. He did not always answer well. He kept trying. Effort became a kind of prayer. He grew older and heavier and kinder. Photographers chased the changes like sport. He smiled when it cost nothing. He closed doors when it did. He preferred a phone call with a friend to a banquet with 1,000 strangers. He loved the hush after rain on his island. He loved a good joke told badly. He loved the small mercies that fame cannot buy. He understood that the old codes were cracking. He also understood that many lives still paid for being honest. The industry had not forgotten its habits. He carried the contradiction like a stone in his pocket. It kept him alert. It kept him grateful. In private, he said the only immortality worth anything is kindness. The camera fades. The gesture lingers. He did not chase legacy. He chose moments. A visit to a hospital wing. A check written without publicity. A conversation with a young actor who needed courage more than advice. He left those rooms lighter than he entered them. The older he grew, the less he needed from strangers. He wanted good work when it came. He wanted gentleness when it did not. He had once been the loudest signal in American cinema. In later years, he became a steady hum, a reminder that art without empathy is a trick, a reminder that truth without care is a blade. He kept listening for the note that started everything. The one his mother nearly sang. The one the country tried to silence. He heard it again in the ocean at night. The road bent toward a final chapter. He gathered what mattered and let the rest fall. The world would craft its summaries. He preferred the unrecorded moments that made a life feel lived. The closing act would ask for clarity. He was ready to answer it with restraint. Here is the shape of it. A boy learned to read rooms. A man taught a country to read itself. He showed that strength could tremble and still be true. He showed that love does not respect fences drawn by fear. The price was heavy. The reward was human. Not the trophy, not the tabloid. The right to feel without apology. Brando said he had loved men and women. He did not say it to shock. He said it because truth is lighter to carry than lies. Many could not risk that sentence. He knew the risk and spoke anyway. That is why his work still vibrates. You can hear the courage in every pause, every glance, every breath he measured on camera. His story is not a saint's march. It is a human ledger. Joy on one side, damage on the other, and mercy in the middle. He failed people. He protected people. He raised his voice for those the screen ignored. He offered a map for surviving image culture without losing your pulse. Move toward honesty. Resist shame. Make the work answer to your heart. If his films moved you, say why below. If the history changed how you see Hollywood, share a thought. Subscribe for more hidden stories that shape the light on that silver wall. We will keep searching the rooms with no names and hold the doors wider. The screen goes dark. The ocean keeps speaking. Somewhere a radio plays a standard. Somewhere a boy hears it and decides to live.